righty, here we go on a Thursday night, live again, live reaction time. Back for the second time in just over a week. This is the Gem City Sports Podcast Network, brought to you as always by Rebich Investments. We are keeping financial guidance simple at Rebich Investments. If you want more information, head over to their website, www.rebichinvestments.com, or you can call their phone number during business hours, 814-734-3433, 814-734-3433. This is the Gem City Sports Podcast Network. Isaac Petcast joining you, and Nick Artman in the studio tonight, back from his trip out west that I think you're still catching up to the time zone, my friend, but that's okay. I don't blame you. Vegas does that to you sometimes.
Listen, man, as I get older, that time change gets harder and harder.
I was only to Vegas once. I was there for a week for the Super Bowl, and by Monday night, I thought it was already April. That's where we were at.
I've always been like a jet lag. What's a jet lag? Why is jet lag bothering? And I get it.
But I'll tell you what, though, it was neat to be able to watch a sporting event that started like 4 o'clock out there, 7 o'clock Eastern, have it be done by 7, and then you can go to bed and get a full night's rest.
The college women's basketball game was at like 3 p.m. It was awesome. It was over by 6. I could get dinner. I could go to bed. It was great. And then the men's game was late, but it wasn't as late for us because I think it was like 8 p.m. or something like that when it finished, 9 p.m. So, that's about the one advantage I could think of was I didn't have to stay up till midnight, 1 o'clock to catch those.
Yeah, love it. Well, I'll tell you what. Luckily for us, we're on East Coast time now, because otherwise we'd be doing this podcast at about 10 o'clock Eastern, even later, 11 o'clock Eastern for something like this. Yeah. Anyway, it is now time for our live reaction. We did this last time with game number 1 between the Otters and Saginaw for game 1 of the series. Nick joining us now here. And it has gone final. Erie falling in a 6-3 defeat tonight to the London Knights in what was my initial reaction to this, Nick. We were on last week at the Erie Insurance Arena, and we said, we think Erie's going to win the series. We figured that was coming, even though really we were there for the only dead performance that they had all series long. So we were just bad luck. So maybe what we're going to foreshadow a little bit here isn't a good idea. But the offense clearly kept up. But I think now my initial reaction to this is it's a different animal you're playing, clearly. And I think that even though Saginaw was a team that could score goals, London is just a fundamentally sound team. And my initial thoughts to the game tonight was one team just had too many mental mistakes. The other team knows that they've been there before. And that, to me, is the reason why you're looking at a 1-0 deficit in the face for Erie. They made so many lapses tonight, Nick.
Well, and I think the biggest was in the penalty game, right? Like we talked about, I don't remember if it was with Trevor, with Tim last week, or it was with Tim. We talked about how they needed to be the villains, right? That this team was going to be the underdog for the year, and that's fine. They're fine playing that villain game. Well, then they come into this game, and they try to be that, right? They try to be the villains right off the bat. You have a hat trick of fights between the first and second period where you have both teams coming off the ice. But then the problem was it didn't really fire up the offense because then the penalties kept coming. London played smart. They maybe backed up a little bit. They still had some penalties into the second to the third, but it was ultimately the 2 power play goals scored by the Knights that I think really kind of put them ahead in this one. So, I think Erie tried to play that level of villainry, but I think it just didn't work in this case. They shot themselves in the foot, like you said. They end up in the penalty box a ton, and then the Knights capitalize with a couple power play goals.
Yeah, I mean, the way that this game started, and this is something that I was concerned about for the Otters at the beginning of this series, is that, when you're an underdog in these playoffs, and I would say if you're Erie, we have to admit they're a significant underdog. I mean, London raced themselves through the regular season. They swept Owen Sound in games that weren't very close. I mean, we talked a lot about how Erie kept scoring goals at will. London in their 4-game sweep scored 6, 7, and 8 goals. So, I mean, this team can score light the lamp on offense too. And my concern was at the beginning of the series, and I think it played out tonight, was that Erie would try to, out fear, if for lack of a better word, this London team, right? You try to throw punches, you try to fight, you try to impose your physical will. But I mean, that, as much as we talked about last series and how, Erie was able to counterpunch better than Saginaw, right? Saginaw was an all offense team. You go from the center line in and you attack. London's a team that doesn't allow you to do that. And so what I'm concerned about now for the Otters is if you lose your identity like this in game one, now you play from behind. And I think my concerns moving through the stretch is going to be the fact that Erie is going to potentially lose their identity. I don't know if this physical nature that you necessarily see with the Saginaw series or the regular season, I don't know if it's going to work against London, because we saw the counterpunch from London's much better than what they've seen all year.
London is just one of the best teams in the OHL right now. I mean, you go look at their roster, and they have stars and draft picks on both the offense and defensive side of the puck. So it's just crazy to me, because on one hand, right, the Otters need to be that physical, because you have to try and slow it down, and they have the penalty kill to kind of pull it off, right? I mean, even the London was still only 2 for 6 on the power play, but it was those two that made the difference, right? Because it was tied 2-2. Landon Sims gets the power play goal to break the 2-2 tie at 16:30 into the second, and then it breaks it open from there. London, then you end up with the next power play goal at the start of the third, and then that just was too much for the Otters to recover. They were never able to score again after that. They're up 5-3, and they get the empty netter to make it 6-3. So it's maybe the only way they can try and slow down this team. The Otters can slow down this team, but it's not enough if the London Knights are going to have those types of opportunities, if their offense can play ahead, because the Otters are not going to be able to play from behind.
Well, here's where you look at the first 2 goals of the game, and this is where the London series is going to be way different than the Saginaw series. Saginaw series, when Erie scored, starting in game 1, it became an avalanche, and they get Saginaw on their toes. They force them back in the defensive zone, and then it becomes an advantage for Erie in that game, because you just play to the likes of what Saginaw doesn't want you to do, which is you just keep the puck behind them. They don't have numbers. I mean, how many odd man rushes, Nick, did we see in game 3 live? Erie didn't convert on them, but they had a bunch. And so Pano Femus, it took 18 minutes for a goal to be scored, which I think if you were to tell Erie that it'd be 0-0 18 minutes into the hockey game, they'd be thrilled.
Right,
in Budweiser Gardens with over 10,000 fans, you get a power play goal from Pano. You're feeling good. You've got 1:57 to go until the period ends. You're going to be up 1-0. Your best goal scorer in the playoffs just scored. And then 34 seconds later, here comes Cam Allen, who busts one by on an assist from Austin Elliott, on the goaltender, on a play that just absolutely went from end to end in about 2 seconds. And now you're looking at the end of the first and you're thinking, okay, that goal really, A, didn't matter, and B, now our momentum's gone.
Right.
And so I give credit for the Otters in the first 7 minutes of the second for weathering the storm, but you don't have what you had last series. You now don't have the ability to have an avalanche worth of goals, and I just don't see that happening now in this series. And to me, the opening stanza of goals really supplements that. Is that even up a goal, an advantage goal, a power play goal, which your best player scores, London doesn't blink. And so now you don't have that advantage, in my view, of being able to have an avalanche worth of goals, because London, they remind me a lot, and we're comparing OHL to NHL teams. Sure. They remind me a lot of Detroit in 2008 and 2009 when they were playing Pittsburgh in the final, right? You get a relatively young team in the Penguins who, especially in 2008, they would get the first goal, especially in game 3 and 4 when they were at home. It looks like they've got momentum. They've got the younger team, the faster legs. And then all of a sudden you sit there, and 3 minutes later, that momentum, it's like it disappeared. And that's what it did for Erie tonight. And that could be a trend if they're not careful.
No, I agree. I mean, I totally agree. And right, like you said, you're feeling pretty good because, about midway through the period, you're up 2-1. That bully ball, that villain puck is playing, and then they score 5 unanswered, and it's not coming through. So I like the scrappy comparison, and I want to see them, continue that, because I think, like we talked about at the live show last week, that works for them, and that's going to fit into their identity moving forward. But they need to find goals. They need to play goals, right? And you can look at this if you're just box score hunting. You say, okay, the Knights put up 6. Oh, Erliden had another bad game. Erliden was standing on his head in this game, he had 5 goals against, but he's 35 saves or 30 saves and 35 shots. And that's tough for any goalie to keep that up. So I think, to your point, I like the comparison, but they got to also find some offense in there as well. Or, let me pull that back, because it's not necessarily the offense. We've seen them pull the offense in the game. If they're going to play that level of villain puck, then they need to also stop the offense on the London Knights to be able to stay on top.
Well, the thing that stands out to me, Nick, when it comes to the defense, is this is a series you could really use Matthew Schaefer.
100%.
We saw, and one of the things that I'll be the first to admit, when you look at this Erie D-core, it doesn't scream goals. You're not going to get a ton of offensive production from this defense, but what it did so well in the Saginaw series, especially Ty Henry and Nate Sauter, who have grown leaps and bounds from where they were last year. They were a liability last year in the postseason. Ty Henry, especially this season, they've been a lot better. But because they are, for the most part, that stay-at-home defensive pair, Saginaw never really got a chance to have a lot of odd man rushes, to have free skates, because those two guys, and really the rest of the 6, whether it's Ambrosio and McCall or Davio and Frazier, they were always back. Yeah. And so you could eliminate the biggest threat that Saginaw posed to you, which was scoring off the rush. London is just so more disciplined, and we saw that tonight, that if you take away this first goal that they scored, which was the quick up from Austin Elliott to Cam Allen, and again, we're watching as much of this game, and we're watching it on TV. It's not like we're Bednard and Kubea in the booth, but right. London's such a process-oriented team with Dale Hunter that they don't come necessarily with speed. They're going to come with momentum, and they're going to come with numbers. And so a guy like Matthew Schaefer, to me, would do 2 things in this series. And who knows if he and Terrance are going to play? We don't know. They've been skating in non-contact jerseys. I'm not an expert, but it seems like right now this is more of a long game thing maybe than it is. You try to get them back as soon as possible, but I digress. Matthew Schaefer would allow you to play that hybrid role where you can attack the puck at the blue line. Yeah. Where if a Denver Barkey or an Easton Cohen is coming into the zone, or O'Reilly in the middle there with that top line, you can intrude their entrance and make it so difficult for them to set things up. A team like London works really well when they're set up and when they're cycling the puck. Yeah. Not allowing them to cycle the puck is a big thing. I just don't know if Henry, Davio, Sauter, those sort of guys, the stay-at-home defensive types, are capable of doing that against this sort of a talent. And I think a Matthew Schaefer would let you do that, because you can't let London get comfortable. You can't let them settle in, and whether it was on the power play or really the other 3 goals they scored minus the rush goal, that's what happened tonight, just from my view.
Yeah, they play the Knights. They play the trap game very well, right? 4 in the offense, 1 in the back, and then you're just cycling that puck. And you see that. I mean, they're able to put that kind of pressure. And to the Otters' defensive credit, they're sitting back, they're stopping the goals, or they're trying to not let any goals into the net, but they're not disrupting that trap game. When you let, to your point, like you're saying, that when you let the Knights just kind of pass around, there's just nothing to turn that puck back over, right? And I think along those lines, I mean, Ty Henry was -1, and you had Ambrosio, like you talked about, was -1. But here's the bigger red flag on the defensive side of the puck is you have your top line of Spence, Alfano, and Femus all -3 tonight. Yep. Right? And that's a big problem, because those guys are going to get the most minutes. They're the ones you're counting on to score. But in that trap game that the Knights are playing, you also need them to try and turn the puck over. So not only do you need your defense to stand up, and yes, I agree, we'll talk about Matthew Schaefer here in a second. That will be a huge step up against anybody. I mean, potential #1 overall draft pick. But you also need some defensive play from the offensive players as well. And this offense, like you talked about, being that maybe that gritty underdog type of team, they can score at will, and we've seen them score on the penalty or on the shorthanded or on power play or even strength. But against this London Knight team that's loaded with talent, who's going to sit in that trap and pass around, you also need those guys to play back on defense and disrupt the puck as well. So, credit to the defense, but I also want to see some more defense out of that top wing, that top line.
The hardest thing against this London team, and we've seen this since Dale Hunter came in as head coach, and this guy's been with the London Knights since 0102. He, I believe, is a part owner of the team now. Really, the only time he took a break was when he went to coach the Capitals for a bit in 2011, 2012, is his style of play shows in London teams. He's got plenty of talent, no question about that. Denver Barkey and Easton Cohen are going to be NHL superstars, and there are going to be others as well, whether it's Jacob Julie and Landon Sim, who are going to be there too. But, Dale Hunter was never a guy who was going to be this finesse sort of a player. He's a grind it out, going to score goals when you get to the net, and I think his style of play really translates well with this London team. And so, the Matthew Schaefer equation to me is really interesting. And I think this is something worth getting into tonight, Nick, because you're in a tough spot if you're Erie. Now, we don't know how close Schaefer is. We don't know how close Terrance is. And of course, Carey's going to move on to bigger and better things. He just today signed an entry-level contract with the Ducks. Right. So he'll be in Anaheim next year in all likelihood, barring any crazy injury or something that keeps him on the sideline. But for Matthew Schaefer, I guess put yourself into Dave Brown's shoes, if you would, Nick. And you've got this superstar defender who can score goals. He probably in this series is going to be worth at least a half a win to a win if he's able to play at some point.
Yeah.
And yet you don't. Do you want to jeopardize your fate of the number one potential pick? Because in all likelihood, he's going to go number one in the draft.
Sure.
What do you do? Schaefer, I'm sure, wants to play. What do you do? Is there a good recipe for this? Because it's not often that you see a player of this caliber in this sort of a situation. Again, we don't know how banged up he really is. He could just not be good to go and he's skating to skate. But what do you do here?
If I'm the GM or if I'm Schaefer?
I guess both.
I think if I'm Schaefer, you're talking about a collarbone injury. That's a lot of stress, in any position, whether you're playing offense, defense, you're trying to check, you're trying to hit. The timeline for a fracture I've read is anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks. You can kind of begin skating after 3, 4. We're well beyond that. But, you can't really get full contact until you're closer to 2 months. So if you're Schaefer, you're probably, like you said, likely the number one overall pick in the draft. I'm not trying to downplay the OHL playoffs, but you kind of need to think about moving forward, right? And I don't know. I'm with you. I don't know where Schaefer is at. I'm just trying to put my feet in his skates. Mm-hmm. And if I'm looking at that, I'm not trying to let my team down because I know he wants to be out there, but he's trying to think bigger picture of trying to, stay draft relevant because you never know. You pick up a bigger injury, you're not going to be ready for, preseason skates and stuff like that. I think you're in a tough spot with Schaefer, and I think I want to play, but I also got to think about my future, so I'm going to hold off. Now, on the Otter side of the ball, or on the Otter side of the puck, I'm still on Final Four Vegas mode. If I'm on the Otter side of the puck, I want to do everything I can to get my star player back. And I think, like you said earlier, they need not only his defensive presence, but just his team presence to be available, to be that vocal leader that he has shown to be in the past and to be out there. So I think it's like in a pool of unknowns, man. I hate to speculate. If I'm the Otters, I want him back. If I'm Schaefer, I don't blame him for maybe, again, I don't know that he is, just maybe thinking about the draft upcoming.
It's a hard situation too. It's different than what the Seawolves have with injuries and situations like that because those decisions aren't up to them. Those decisions, of course, are up to the Tigers, and the Tigers organization are the ones who controls who gets called up, who gets called down, how many innings you're allowed to pitch as a pitcher, whether you play or not for the rest of the season if you're a player in the minors. But, I think from an on-ice standpoint, I think I don't know if a large playoff run is going to impact Matthew Schaefer's draft stock. I don't even know for a guy like Malcolm Spence if it would improve his draft stock. The biggest thing that I want to know if you're the Otters is if he is available to play at some point in this series and he says he wants to play, do you A, choose to play him, and then B, when do you play him? It's not likely he's going to play in game 2 either. I don't anticipate that happening. Is it potentially game 3, 4, 5? We're just speculating here. But let's be completely honest here. Matthew Schaefer defending Barkey, O'Reilly, and Cohen would be tremendous. It would be gigantic. And I think for the Otters, I don't want to say you're not winning this series without him or Terrance, but it's just going to be really difficult because of the nature of which those guys play.
Well, I would agree with you 100%. I mean, you need Schaefer to shore up the defensive side of the blue line. Terrance would absolutely add some offensive firepower into this game, and honestly, it would make the teams more even in terms of star power on both sides. So, if you're Erie, though, you're also not trying to rush these guys back faster than they need to be. You need to look out for your players because whether like you said, Terrance signed the 3-year deal. He's probably going to Anaheim. But even if Schaefer goes first overall, it's likely that he could end up back in Erie as well. So
it's most likely that he does, yeah.
Yeah, you need to be worried about their longevity as well. Going back to the collarbone for Schaefer, he plays defense. He needs to be able to play pain-free. Do they need them to beat this to take down London in the series? God, sure would make it easier, but I think they're going to be careful and not rush them back. You know what, though? It is positive to see the no contact jerseys. That's the first you've seen that coming through. I don't know that they'll play game 2. Maybe they're ready next week for game 3 when they come back to the EIA. Man, that would be a great story to watch.
Yeah, and it would just make it for a fun series too. I think the storyline this season has been in the conference. There have been 3 teams, right? London, Kitchener, Windsor, who have just been ahead and above every single other team. Saginaw made a late run there, of course. Erie was strong 5 seed, and we saw them win the series. But getting Schaefer and Terrance back, I think, again, not that Erie has become a desolate hockey town because they're not. They've been built since McDavid was here and even maybe early on to the likes of Ryan O'Reilly. But it would just be an exciting series to watch. And to your point, Nick, I think the only thing that would be in the back of my mind if you're Matthew Schaefer and you're debating, whether or not you want to go and you want to play, this is a guy, remember, that got hurt in the World Juniors. He didn't get that opportunity to play. This is probably going to be the best level of NHL-like competition that you would get in a series. And that's with due respect to the other teams, if they do move on, that they would play. I think London is the most NHL-esque team to be in the OHL this season with the guys that they have the top line. Even some of the defenders that they have on the back end, whether it's Dickinson, Bonk on the second line, Brewsterwich, who has been, I think, really, really good for the last couple of years for this Knights team. He's going to have to face all of them if he's going to play 200-foot games. So that'll be something interesting to see as well. And then the big question here, Nick, too, is Erie capable of keeping up with London? We've talked about this a little bit here, but now you get game 2 on Saturday. And I think, you don't want to call it a must-win game. I just can't see how Erie wins 4 of 5 if they lose game 2. Is there an avenue that they have to take to be able to win this game? Because, again, it's not that they played an awful game. They just played exactly how London wanted them to play, and they couldn't get goals in the third period. I mean, it was a 1-goal game heading into the third period. London gets the early goal, and there you go. So my question, I guess, is what do they have to do differently outside of the fact that shooting themselves in the foot for 6 penalties doesn't help you?
Well, 2 things. One, I'm not a fan of cliches. Just ask my students. But this is absolutely a must-win game because it's going to be really tough to come home. It's going to be tough to be down 2-0 to London and try to win this series because, like you said, they don't have the firepower to win shootout type games where you're trying to win 6-7, 5-4. That's going to be really tough. But what they do need to do is, I say, stick with the villain puck form of play. Stick with that bruiser mentality, but you got to know when to slow it down. And you got to make sure that if you're going to do that your penalty kill is going to be up to par. Their special teams, I think, is the strength. The Erie Otters, their special teams on both the power play.
Which is wild to say.
I know.
based on last year and the beginning of this season.
I agree, but they're playing really smart on both the power play and the penalty kill. So they don't have the power to outplay London. But if they like you said, London baited them into playing exactly what they wanted to do. Erie's got to get back onto their game. They can play that bully hockey, but they need to also make sure that they're being smart and leaving their emotions in check as well. So I do think it's a must-win game. I do expect Erie to win this game. I do. I just think that they're going to come back. They're going to see what they've seen in London. They know what to fix, and they're not always going to make the mistakes that they made, like you said, tonight with the penalties. So if they can clean up some of that, still play that bruiser hockey, and you saw that. I mean, like I said, the first fight happened at 10:13. You had roughing penalties in 6:49 in the first. So they're trying to do that. They need to keep doing it, get London off their game, but they also need to play smart special teams as well.
Yeah, I know. I'm with you. I think the biggest thing for the Otters going into game number 2 is you don't have to change a lot besides the fact that you don't have to go over and beyond what you think your physical game has to be.
Yeah.
I mean, again, let's keep this in mind. If Erie plays fundamentally sound hockey for the last 90 seconds of the first period, you're up 1-0, and then do things change? If they don't give up the early third period goal and it's 4-3 with 10 minutes left to go, do things change? If they don't yield 6 penalties and maybe it's 2 or 3, do things change? There are so many ifs in game 1.
Yeah.
The one thing that would concern me too is I don't even know if this London team played their best game tonight. That's the other thing too, is I think both these teams have room to improve from game number 2, but for the Otters, it's going to be a short memory because you let one that you could have won slip away. And I think learning lessons have to be learned from this team, because keep in mind, Saginaw, again, could score goals. This London team is really built different. And I think going back 1-1 would be huge as well, because you can't expect to win 2 games on home ice. I mean, like it or not, the home crowd's going to be huge for Erie. And we really hope that, and we'll get to this in a second, that when we're there Tuesday, it's a sellout crowd because, we all love London down here in Erie, Pennsylvania. But the Knights are probably going to win, in all likelihood, one of the 2 games in Erie. So you have to buffer for that and at least have an opportunity to send it back to Budweiser Gardens for game number 5. Yeah. And so I do think Erie will come out a lot better in game number 2. I think getting the lead again will be huge. Keep in mind, Erie took the lead in this game 1-0 and then proceeded to give up 4 straight goals. So I think they're going to have to play a more complete game, and the mistakes, that's just it. You can't have any mistakes in this series if you're going to want to win.
No, and like you said, the reason London didn't look like they were at their best was because Erie was playing their game for the first half of this game. They were playing their style of play, right? They had the momentum early. They were up 2-1. They had London on their heels in terms of a physical type of game, but then they just got down, and they got down again, and they got down again. London scored 5 unanswered. That's what you had to stop. So like you said, London didn't play their best game tonight, but I think it's because Erie was playing theirs. So get back to that. Get back to playing that bully ball. Get back to being that aggressive, I'm going to knock you off the puck. I'm going to knock you out of your trap. I'm going to knock you around, and I'm going to take some penalties, but keep it up, right? And not let London score 5 unanswered, because like you said, that was what swung this game, and it swung it hard. But for the first half of the game, and this was, I think, what is the biggest takeaway that you can say for Erie, is they controlled the first period and a half of this. That means they can do it. So they need to figure out what worked in that first period and a half, make those adjustments, and come home to EIA with a 1-1 game.
Yeah, and just don't turn the puck over at the blue line, because that is going to kill you upon kill you upon kill you, because London will take advantage, and they did a couple of times tonight. Yeah. So game number 2, Saturday, 7 o'clock at Budweiser Gardens, or whatever. I think they still call it Budweiser Gardens. It's been that forever. We call it the corporate arena of the OHL. So that's coming up Saturday. We don't know what the series is going to be when we come back for game number 3, but we do know, Nick, and we're excited to announce again tonight, we're back live at the Erie Insurance Arena for game number 3. 6 o'clock show on Tuesday. We're going to be with all y'all crazy fans who are hopefully waving all kinds of towels and Sweet Caroline playing minute after minute after minute after minute. So make sure to come out and join us, whether it be live in person or there coming up on Tuesday, Nick. We're pumped. It's going to be a great show. Obviously, you saw the show just a week ago, a week and a half ago when we were there on Tuesday in Game 3 against Saginaw. We hope to bring more goals to the Otters. But, man, it's a fun atmosphere. It's a great time, and some of our best shows and most exciting shows that we're a part of are when we're live.
Listen, when we did the live show last week, the energy that's in that building, even just doing a broadcast from there, is addicting. I mean, you're fired up just being in the arena. The fans start piling in. The teams start warming up. It's a different feel, man. So I agree. If you're at the arena, come say hi. If you are checking in online, make sure you check the pregame with us at 6 o'clock because it's always a fun time.
Yeah, and it'll be a good one. Again, make sure to be there because it's London after all, and one way or another, Erie's going to need a win, whether they're down 2-0 or whether it's a 1-1 series. So we'll see what happens on Saturday night. All right, Nick, before we go, just for fun, I know it's Thursday. I know Round's already here, but you can see I'm wearing my green, not for London, but for the Masters, and everyone's been given their picks. Who do you got? Obviously, Justin Rose is 7 under. You've got Scotty there at 4 under. Rory McIlroy's playing well. Based on today, who do you have to win the Masters?
I think Scotty Scheffler's playing some of the best golf in the world right now. I think I saw today, if you bet $100 for him to win the Masters, you're going to lose $100 if he wins. So, I mean, that just shows you how locked in he is.
Yeah.
I think that's the easy, maybe most obvious pick. Finished, top 3 of the leaderboard, I think I saw earlier today. Justin Rose has a great start after round 1 at -7 under. But, I mean, Scheffler looks incredible already again this year.
Yeah, I want to pick him, but I feel like that's the easy pick. I'm going to go Ludwig Ahlberg, who ended up with a 68 today. He struggled. He was even on the front 9, ended up birdieing 12, 13, 15, and 18 to finish 4 under. So he's in a tie with Scheffler there for second. Connors is there as well at the top. Tyrrell Hatton and Bryson DeChambeau each 3 under, and Justin Rose sitting there 7. I think it'd be fun to see a first-time winner. And man, I think we would never get this. We got to see if Augusta National Golf Club at some point will let podcast networks in. Just make it like the Super Bowl. You pick 18 podcast networks a year, right? They all can be on the greens of each hole. right before. We would not be close to first, second, or 18th in line, but man, that's a fun spectacle. And every time I watch golf, I think to myself, like, man, if I started at like 2 years old,
yeah,
my work life would be pretty incredible right now.
If I started at 2 years old, I'd still be awful.
It was funny. We were talking to Scott Stano, Gannon's coach, on the United Gannon podcast earlier this evening, and he was talking about I don't know, we don't want our team to peak too early. And I said, man, if you're telling me that in April I peaked and shot like an 80, I wouldn't play again all year. I'd be thrilled.
I don't think I've ever shot double digits on 18 in my life.
No, God, I'm nowhere near there. So who knows? Maybe some point in my lifetime. All right, make sure to join us again Tuesday, 6 o'clock from the Erie Insurance Arena. We do have another show, though, coming up on Monday, Flagship City Sports Talk. Join us 9 a.m. for that. Nick, Paul, and I talking all things sports. Otters, Seawolves on a heater, by the way. They continue to win baseball games at a rapid and torrid pace, trying to defend their championships from the last 2 seasons. We'll see you all on Monday morning, everybody.